So full disclosure here, 40 years as a sports broadcaster at CTV Saskatoon. I covered the Saskatchewan Roughriders for decades. I was involved in the early 70s when the club was near bankrupt. I took part in many telethons to keep the team floating. And in 2015, I became a member of Parliament for Saskatoon Grasswood. So obviously, my first set of questions will go to the CFL Commissioner, Randy Ambrosie. Thank you, Randy, for testifying today in front of the Finance Committee. Unfortunately, some of your comments today have a lot of holes in them. First of all, is it a bailout that you're asking, or is it a loan that you're asking from the Government of Canada, the first $30 million?
Well, Minister Waugh, thank you very much. And the answer to your question is what we're really looking for is a partnership with government. We're really anxious to sit down, and I should say, by the way, we've had a great conversation with your colleagues and various ministries. What we really want to do is sit down and talk about a way to work together so that we get through the crisis. But our fundamental position is that we are looking for financial support that we want to pay back to Canadians. If it's in the form of a loan, that perhaps we repay some of that loan back through programs. I think we're rather almost legendary, and our players are legendary for their ability to be in the communities and make a difference in the lives of children and young adults. Our work in the northern communities. So essentially, what we want to do is sit down with government and build a partnership, one that will make sure that we're responsible Canadians to Canadians. We don't want to stand in front of other Canadians that have serious needs. So we're really looking for a business relationship, and one that will be good for Canadians in the long run.
So what you're really looking for is gifts in kind, where you would be the league sports spokesman for several government agencies coming forth. I get that. It will be more or less the gifts in kind that would go along with this agreement if you do, in fact, get it from the federal government. I was surprised because there was no proposal when you brought this forward last month to the federal government. You didn't bring the Players Association on board. It was almost a proposal by Randy Ambrosie himself. Many of the teams in the CFL are doing very well. The community-owned teams in particular, where the Saskatchewan Roughriders made a profit of $1.5 million on their latest disclosure from 2018. Winnipeg, $2.6 million. Edmonton, $2.8 million. The rest are privately owned, as you know. Big, deep pockets from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, a $4 billion organization. The Calgary Sports and Entertainment. You have Roger Greenberg, connected with the Ottawa franchise. You have Bob Young, David Braley. So really, Commissioner, there's a lot of public skepticism when you came forward last month wanting partial bailout, we're going to call it, of $30 million, when many of your league teams right now are taking the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. And that will total about $5 million, and it runs out next month. So, the public and the media in itself, and I've seen a lot of comments in the last month, we are skeptical because when you look at the deep pockets, I think the CFL myself, since I've covered them for over 4 decades, is the most stable that it has ever been. And yet you come out with a $30 million ask and another $120 million if the season doesn't go ahead. And yet, we have the unemployment in Calgary at 8.6. We have businesses all across this country suffering. Yesterday, I did a newsletter where it was, and take this, really seriously. The province of Saskatchewan bleeds green. We all know that. And I did a poll where it was overwhelmingly, they did not want any support to the CFL. That coming from the best franchise that you have today. So how do you go about this today in front of the committee with your hands out for $30 million and maybe another 120? And I get it, your league is driven by fans. The TSN deal certainly helps, but as you said, the advertisers and the TV deal, that is just money that you're going to have to pay back if the games aren't. So you've got about a minute left, if you don't mind, Commissioner. Just talk about how you can come to the committee today asking for the $30 million and then later maybe another 120.
We'll give you whatever time you need, Commissioner. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, I'd start by thanking you for your question, and I guess point out the fact is those numbers that you quoted as related to our 3 community teams are only part of the CFL story. And of course, those numbers, while they were positive in 2018, as you've referenced, are going to be dramatically different in 2020 as we face the very real scenario of a at best a truncated season and then possibly a lost season completely. And the fact is that in the face of essentially a zero revenue model, all of our teams, including our community teams, are going to suffer significant losses that are going to be hard to recover from. You know, we have great strength in those community teams, but again, it's only part of the story because we've got private owners and corporate owners who have invested not for the sake of a great return, but have really invested in Canada and Canadian culture and Canadian sport. And I called them sports philanthropists, but there is a limit to the amount of support they're prepared to give, that their families are prepared to give. And the real issue is that this crisis is essentially going to quadruple or more the financial losses that our teams will take in a season that could potentially be lost altogether. So again, I want to be clear on behalf of my league and our owners, our board of governors. We are not looking for a handout. We're not. We're looking really for a partnership with government. We're looking for a solution, and we believe we can sit at the table and talk about a way to work together that'll get us through the crisis so that we can resume our activities working with our players as partners. And we've resumed our discussions with the players. We know we have work to do there, but ultimately, I think everyone that's associated with our league can agree on one thing. What everyone wants is for this league to survive.
My questions to start will be to Mr. Ambrosie and the CFL. I'm a big supporter of the CFL. I support the BC Lions. I've supported other CFL teams too when I've lived in other parts of the country, and I've had legislation, as you probably know, to support the CFL. But I'm a bit perplexed with your testimony today. Why are you not here today with representatives from the Players Association? Those are the world-class athletes, as you've said, that actually are the heart and soul of the CFL. What would they be saying if they were before the committee? And how much of the financial support that you're requesting would be going directly to the players of the CFL?
Well, you know, I'm here representing the CFL today and not representing the players. And yet I would tell you, I wake up every day thinking about those players and their families, as I do the league employees and our coaches and football operations people and our fans. So look, we're meeting with the players again tomorrow afternoon. It's Thursday today. We're meeting with them again tomorrow afternoon to talk about our approach to government and to see how we can work better together to approach government and have a conversation about how we protect this great league of ours. So that, you know, we expect to do that and to try to harmonize our thoughts. As for how much will go to players, we have to work that out. That's why we want a conversation with government. We want to talk about how we can work together. We know, for example, that our players and our alumni could be a potential solution in the healing of Canada. But we need to talk to the players about that. We need to talk to government about that, and then together work out a strategy. So our approach was that we just simply wanted government to know that we need help. The details of how it all comes together are yet to be decided, and that has to be done with our players, and it has to be done with the government as partners.
I think, Mr. Chair, there's a compelling argument to have the CFL Players Association here before committee. Thank you for your answer. But the reality is, as we know, it's the CFL players that are the heart of CFL football. And I think it's important that we hear from them as quickly as possible. My final question to you, Mr. Ambrosie, is as has been pointed out, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, $4 billion in assets, the Edwards family, over $1 billion in assets, the Greenberg family, $1.5 billion in assets. These are all part of the ownership group around the CFL. Many Canadians are suffering a lot. They're suffering and really struggling to put food on the table, to struggle with minimum wage frontline jobs, to actually keep a roof over their head. And I'm sure they would be asking the question, these owners that are extraordinarily wealthy in Canadian terms, why are they not stepping up to provide supports for the CFL at this critical time?
Well, in fact, all of those groups and people that you've mentioned have been stepping up. Our league lost somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million last year, and those losses were funded by those individuals and those groups you're describing. And in fact, I would say I call them sports philanthropists. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment did not buy the Argos because they believed that they would have a great financial windfall. They bought the Argos because they love Canada and they love the CFL and they wanted to help rebuild the team. Their losses were substantial. And so the question really for us is, how many losses can these owners take when they've been losing approximately in total $20 million a year? And there is now, of course, a dramatically accelerated level of losses that will come with a truncated season or a lost season altogether. I don't think it would be fair to question the motives of our owners, because I think they are remarkable Canadians who have given tremendously to our league and our sport. And again, we're not looking for a handout. We really aren't looking for Canadians. We don't want to stand in front of Canadians with real needs. We're looking for a partnership with government where we can sustain this league through the crisis. We want to pay the government back and taxpayers back. So we think our ask is different than it may be reflected. But really what we want to do is sit down and have a conversation with all of you.
With the remaining time, Mr. Chair, I'll ask questions to Mr. Ambrosie. Mr. Ambrosie, thank you for your testimony. And like my colleagues who have spoken, I too am a CFL fan. I converted from an Argos fan to a Hamilton Ticats fan by my father-in-law, but that's a long story. I grew up admiring Rocket Ismail and Pinball Clemens. But I have to ask you, because I'm an MP and because I represent constituents, ultimately we're accountable to the citizen, to the taxpayer. Why hasn't the CFL gone and asked for assistance from banks? I think that's just an obvious question that hasn't been asked yet. Why the federal government and not banks?
Well, I think the answer lies in the fact that as a league last year, we lost approximately $20 million. First of all, some of our teams, our community teams, can't, by virtue of their structure, they can't take on traditional commercial credit.
Mr. Ambrosie, so again, I'm under time constraints, so I don't mean to cut you off.
You're pretty near over.
I have to ask you, so if banks won't support the CFL, why should the federal government support the CFL?
Well, it's not a question of whether banks would support us. The issue is that you're now taking a $20 million loss, and you're almost certainly making that loss bigger in future years. You know, our challenge is that we got a situation that is going to be, we're going to see our losses grow as a result of not being able to play games. And if you add traditional consumer debt to our financial statements, all you're going to do is bloat our losses, not make our losses reduced.
My first question is to Mr. Ambrosie. In addition to the financial support that you have requested from the federal government, has there been any discussion with the provinces? Is there any role that the provinces can play during the COVID-19 pandemic, and any discussions in that front?
Yeah, we've started an outreach to the provinces to talk to them about our situation. And, much like this one, what we're saying to the provinces, as we've said to your colleagues at the federal government, that we're looking to be creative. We're willing to be creative to find solutions. Obviously, we want to protect jobs, which is a priority for us. We want to help our players. We want to look after the future of our game. So the answer is yes. We've started those conversations with the provincial governments as well.
So your initial request for funding is 30 million right now. I know you've said that no decision has been made as to how it's going to be paid out, but do you have an idea of where that funding is going to go? Has it targeted any group?
Well, the first big category is to keep as many people employed as we possibly can. We of course don't know whether the wage subsidy program is going to be extended beyond the June 6th expiry date. So that's a question that is overhanging all of us. The big category is that we'd like to keep as many people employed. We want to talk to the players about how we work with the players and find a way to get them funding. And of course, the other is that we take in ticket revenue from our fans, who essentially in this case are serving as creditors, and we expect that we're going to have to pay some of those fans back who are Canadians who have real financial needs. So really, our big bucket is to keep as many people employed as we can, as we see whether or not we can actually get a football season in before, during 2020.